Hello, my name is John James and I'm a writer and campaigner for male victims of female perpetrated domestic violence and an advocate for men's mental health. Welcome to another episode of FTD Talk, and this week we'll be talking to Clive, who's been on the show before, but last time he was talking about his own abuse. And this time he's going to be talking about other male victims of abuse, which is very different from how we usually do FTD Talk, but I think you'll find it interesting. But before you go, don't forget to hit that like button, smash that subscribe button. The bigger the channel gets, the more people we can help. So, take care of yourselves, enjoy the video, look after yourself, look after each other, and don't forget, don't let anybody make you feel afraid. Peace.
Hello, well, welcome to this edition of FTD Talk, and it's Nick, your host, speaking, and a very, very warm welcome to our guest, Clive. Clive, how are you?
Not too bad, thanks very much, Nick. And you?
Oh, I'm great. I'm just really pleased that we've been able to connect on this because I know we've exchanged on Twitter many times and have quite a bit of fun about it, but it's great to actually sort of get to talk to you in person. Just a quick note to our listeners. Our friend Clive is sight impaired, so he hasn't got his camera off, so this will be an audio only broadcast. And actually, this is the second time that Clive has appeared on FTD Talk. So he met our other host, John James, a while back and told us a fascinating story about his experiences of abuse at the hands of a female perpetrator. But Clive, you're with us today because you've got some other anecdotes that you'd like to share with us, haven't you?
Yeah, shortly before my wife died, my brother-in-law was also had terminal cancer. And the last time I saw him, he used to be a police officer. And the last time I saw him, I asked him about his experiences of how they used to handle the idea of domestic abuse against men, against women or whatever. And he told me a few stories. And I promised him the last time I saw him that if ever I got a chance to do anything with those stories that might help to make a difference by helping people to rethink the way that they do things so that they handle cases without bias or whatever, which is a lot of the message that he came out with. Then I said I would do that. So this is on behalf of my late brother-in-law, Alistair. This is, if you like, a sort of a tribute to him. I will be telling the stories he told me and one other as well about parental alienation if we have time.
No, that's great. Well, that sounds fascinating, and how lovely that you're able to respect your friends' wishes in that way. And as an ex-police officer myself, I'm going to be fascinated to hear some of these insights, Clive. So where would you like to start?
I'll start with the most dramatic of the stories, I think, which was all about what happened when in his area, I think he was in Surrey at the time, the police were testing out the CCTVs, and what they had to do is to scan the gardens of households and things like that, and scan the streets so that they could decide what would be seen and recorded and what private properties would actually be sort of blanked out, if you see what I mean.
Yes, yeah.
And they were halfway through this, and one of the guys in the team apparently said, "Oi, come over here and have a look at this. See what's going on in this garden." And they were picking up a picture of two women beating the living daylights out of each other, basically, and in the garden. And then suddenly they stopped and they turned around and gave each other a really good hug and a kiss or whatever, and they went back indoors. The next thing that happened is they get a call saying, "I'm ringing to report domestic abuse. My husband has been beating me up," or whatever. They come round, they see bruises all over their face, and so they sort of say, "Okay, we'll wait for your husband to come in." and we'll take him down to the station. And we'll have words with him. So husband came back and they arrested him. But when he was in the car, they said, this is a bogus arrest. We're not really arresting you because she doesn't know that we saw what was really going on. So we want you to play along with this.
Good
And
grief.
so that when we say he's been arrested, you come down, we'll come down, when she comes down to the station, we will arrest her. Because just by chance, we happen to see that this is a fake, that they were basically staging this, and they'd had a punch up so that they could say, oh, look, I've got bruises on my face. So they took him down and gave him a cup of tea, made out to her when she came in that, she thought they were coming in. What they did is they sent another car round for him behind, and they arrested her properly.
Wow. Oh,
and
my.
it turned out when they heard the story that what they were doing is that this was his wife and one of her neighbors had staged this fight so that they could then go back in, accuse the husband of domestic abuse so that they could get him out of the house and they could move in together because they were having a lesbian relationship at the time.
Oh, no.
And basically, if we do that, if we actually get him done for domestic abuse, then
he's out the way.
He won't have any rights. He won't have any claims on us or whatever. And it backfired on them.
Well, that's what a story. So if they hadn't have been there with those cameras, pure coincidence.
Exactly.
This poor guy would have got stuffed up, basically.
He would have got stuffed up, but they knew what was happening. And at the time, Alistair was actually saying to me, you have to remember at the time when in all of our training, they used to give us what they call the ABC principle. When you're investigating anything, whatever the crime is, use the ABC principle. Assume nothing.
Yeah.
Believe no one. Check facts.
Right.
Now, what a contrast that is to the scenarios that we hear about if you've got to arrest somebody, so on the balance of probabilities, because quote unquote the vast majority unquote, if you believe that bracket allegedly, of male perpetrators are men, then on the balance of probability you back that horse and you've got to arrest the man. That's completely the opposite to what he was trained.
Well, this is yeah, I mean, we know that there are constabularies across the country that have had arrest policies where they've gone to domestic abuse situations, and it has been through local orders that they must remove the man from the household because he poses the greatest threat, quote unquote. So, I mean,
but that is on the basis of it doesn't matter whether or not you've got a small man and a big strapping sort of athlete of a woman sort of thing or whatever. The man,
well it's a sexist policy. Yeah, it's a sexist policy.
Male
anyway,
perpetrator, female victim default or whatever.
Yeah.
As I say, and so that was assume nothing, believe no one, check facts, and so is this. There was another story where a woman, a man had been away for a conference for a weekend, and she got hold of she got hold of the joint account, and she'd maxed it out, and she'd run out of money. So she was then trying to make out. Then she tried to make out to the police that he was coercively controlling her, financially abusing him by not allowing her to have access to any more money, where in fact the truth is that when he came in, she'd spent it all.
Yeah.
And he came back from while the police were interviewing her, he comes back from the conference, he comes in, he goes, what the hell's going on here then? Why are there police or whatever? And once again, it turned out that they saw through it, and they realized that she'd said he wouldn't let me have any money, and they said, he said, I haven't been here for the last 3 days.
Oh dear. Well,
assume nothing, believe no one, check facts.
ABC, yeah, absolutely.
ABC. And
Yeah.
that's why every so often you will see me tweeting, assume nothing, believe no one, check facts, and then at the end say it's easy as ABC. And sometimes I might say, why are we making this so complicated?
But this is what worries me, Clive. I mean, you've just given us two anecdotes there where, you know, the alleged perpetrator, the male, has been very fortunate that by pure coincidence, some officers sniffed out what was going on, and the second occasion were clever enough to spot what goes on. But it makes you wonder how many other occasions there are where false allegations are made, or somebody's framed, and somebody's stuffed up. Because we hear about it, you know, anecdotally we hear about it, and it's difficult to believe. But then when you hear these stories, it validates it, and you think, crikey, it does happen. It happens.
Yeah, that's the reason. That's the reason for coming on and doing this podcast. Now, the third one, Alistair used to work in records at the time, because, you know, he got a desk job because of health issues. You know, by that time, you know, he wasn't walking very well, and they didn't want to get rid of him, and he didn't want to go.
He was on light duties.
He didn't want to go out on the beach. He was on night duties. Well, it was actually
light duties.
Light duties. Yeah, he was on and whatever. And there was another incident where a man and a woman come back from a holiday, and they go into their house unloading the luggage from the boot. And they go inside, and when they get in, they find that something's gone wrong with the electricity, and they can't get any electricity. And she comes back out, and after a nightmare of a journey home, you know, traffic jams, hassle at the airport with the security guys down there, and all of that sort of thing, just a very nightmare, tiring journey. She comes out, she gets a case out of the back of the boot, and as she's going, she bursts into tears and she said, "I've had enough. I can't take any more." There just happened to be what some people in a lot of the crime dramas call a curtain twitcher, opposite, who sees this, hears the cry of anguish, and reports it as a domestic abuse incident. But she then called the police, and they helped them get their electricity back on, sorted out where the fuses were and everything like that, and went away. Alistair then gets the people who from the stats department insisting that he records it as a domestic abuse incident. He said, "No, I refuse." Yeah, but we need to get our stats up. We need to record as many domestic abuse incidents as possible. Can you put this down as a domestic abuse incident?
Yeah. Well,
he said no, because it wasn't one. A lady mistakenly thought it was a domestic abuse incident, but it was just a totally innocent sort of nightmare journey from a holiday. There was no domestic abuse committed. You know, this is a couple who would have been normally happy if it hadn't been for the sort of 9-hour journey from Spain or wherever it was. I'm not putting it down. And they insisted, and they gave him a hell of a lot of pressure. In the end, he called his boss. And he's not playing ball with us. And the boss looks up and said, "Well, no, nor should he. Because if it's an incident, you can record it as a domestic abuse incident. If somebody thought it was domestic abuse, but it turns out to be something else, I'm not having that on the records." He's quite right. I back him. Don't let him do it. And once again, he was actually then gave me the ABC again and said, "Assume nothing, believe no one, check facts," or whatever. But this is even more, you know, rig the statistics almost as sort of, it's not about point scoring. This is about people.
Yeah, and this is the problem, Clive, when you've got an agenda, and when you've got a narrative that you know it pushes everything, doesn't it, in one direction. And it's like kind of, oh no, get the stats up, because it looks really good on us if we've dealt with a violence against women and girls issue.
I've mentioned this on Twitter before. Have you heard of the Greek myth of Procrustes?
Oh, I seem to remember you tweeting about this, but you'll have to remind me. Go on.
Procrustes was supposed to be a psychologist, was supposed to have been not a psychologist. I'll edit that out later if you want. A cyclops who
Oh,
had
yes.
one bed and invited guests in. You know, he was actually running as a guest house like Norman Bates or whatever.
Okay.
And he invited his guests in, but he had one bed. So if the person was too tall for the bed, he'd cut off their legs so that they'd fit the bed. And if the person was too small for the bed, he'd stretch them out in a rack and pinion to fit the bed. And the whole idea is, you know, let's twist the case around until it fits the agenda that we had before we started. And the word is Procrustean.
Yeah.
And that's what they do.
Well,
you know.
This is the other thing that worries me about the training that services get, not just the police, but if we just focus on the police a second, you know, the people say, well, they need training on domestic abuse, and I think, well, that's that's positive, but the problem with it is who's doing the training and what are the key messages? Because if the key messages are reinforcing this idea that abuse is gendered and that it's, you know, disproportionately affects women, a police officer no longer has the ABC because they're now thinking.
That's right. And it's the police, it should be the Crown Prosecution Service. People should be training everybody to do this, social services, the whole lot. Whoever is involved, whoever is doing that, they should stop, I think, looking at the statistics and saying, oh, the vast majority of men, so on the balance of probability, blah, 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 and then sort of girly good, blokey bad, sort of let's twist it to fit that. They should stop doing that, and everybody should go back to ABC. Everybody.
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't matter if you think, if I think about it, if I get run down by a car, I wouldn't want to be told, and this is another thing, you know, when you ring up support and for support, and some of the people that purport to be there for male victims of domestic abuse. When you ring up, and I know somebody who did do a mystery shop on this, and you say that you're a male victim. Oh, we have to remind you that the overwhelming majority of victims are women, you know.
Yes.
Sort of thing. That's not relevant. That is not relevant to somebody when they're going through the pain. If I get run over by a car and the paramedics come, I don't expect them to say, well, hang on a moment. Before we help you and into the ambulance, we have to tell you that more people get run over by buses, and therefore we're not going to be able to. We're not so bothered about you because you were only run down. You know, how would you feel?
It's a really good analogy.
Same sort of thing.
And I say it all the time. You know, as a victim of abuse, what difference does it make to me who wants help? There's two things you want when you're a victim. You want some compassion, and you want some help. And you know. If as a victim, if I want compassion and help, why is the proportion of one class of person getting affected more than the other? Why is that important when I'm a victim? It doesn't matter to me as a victim. I just need that help and support, and I should be entitled and should be able to access the same sort of help and support that anybody does, regardless of race, ethnicity, class, gender, you know, age, whatever.
You see, the thing is, we seem to be so hung up on diversity at the moment. Let's listen to all the groups who are saying, what about me, that we forget about equality of outcomes. And if you're not careful, equality and diversity can actually compete with each other. I know I used to be an equality and diversity advisor when I was at work. And one of the things that I noticed last week, there was an article that we were reading last week, where somebody had published that disabled domestic abuse victims are being forgotten by the system.
Right.
Fair enough. But you go to the article, all of the pictures were of women.
Yeah.
All of the case studies were of women.
Right.
All of the support organizations they interviewed were Women's Aid, Refuge, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And everything except the language was fairly sort of bland and gender neutral rather than inclusive, I will say. But there was no recognition anywhere that disabled men are as vulnerable as non-disabled women. If you look at the statistics in the Mankind Initiative 55 Key Facts, you will
Yeah.
find that you are almost exactly as, according to the statistics they've got from the Office for National Statistics, you are as likely to be a victim of domestic abuse if you are a disabled man as you are if you are a non-disabled woman. But because you're a man, you're not going to get the services. And because you're disabled, the chances are that the services are going to be less accessible to you. So you've actually got a double whammy. You're a minority within a minority. You're right inside layers of an onion.
Yeah, yeah. And it tends to get overlooked as well that in terms of proportion, lesbian couples are at risk as well. So, you know, that you know, but that seems
that
yeah,
and what does that do to the male violence against women and girls narrative? That blows out of that should blow out of the water the narrative that we hear from certain people saying things like, oh well, we all know that it's all about the patriarchy anyway. That was a good talking about.
That was a good Brummie accent, Clive. You're culturally appropriating me. You know, I'm from Birmingham. You know that, don't you?
Yeah, but you're not this person. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do. I know exactly who you're talking about.
You know exactly who I'm talking about. I don't know whether we'll be allowed to keep this, but
I do. It
privately, I call her the jester.
Yeah, yeah. Well, she's certainly happy to laugh at men's plight. I've seen her do that.
So it's about time she got a little bit of her own back then, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Boston.
Well, that's because I was educated in Worcester from the age of 11. That's how I know the accent so much. If you come from Worcester, you like the Birmingham accent.
Well, I'm very near Worcester as we speak, Clive. But say no more. Say no more.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yes, I seem to remember that. There seemed to be a lot. Seemed to be a lot of people from Birmingham that seem to be around the Birmingham area that seem to be doing a lot of good as well.
Yeah, well, my co-host Johnny lives near Worcester, so yeah. Okay, Clive, that's yes.
Quickly,
go on.
If we've got time, I wanted to say something. That thing that I was saying to you about parental alienation.
Yes. Now
this whole idea of people denying that it exists.
Yeah, we've done a couple of podcasts on this recently to try and expose it and try and make those that call it a theory a little bit silly. So if you can help us with that, Clive.
Well, that's the whole idea. Before my second marriage, I was briefly married to somebody else. And I haven't told this story very much because she's too close a friend of the family at the moment, and it would be a bit risky. But one thing that I will say is that I didn't know what it was at the time. There were a lot of things I didn't know when I was a young, callow, 40-year-old, naive, whatever. And I went into the relationship, and she had two daughters, and she had indoctrinated them to the extent that she had a daughter of 6 and a daughter of 8. The daughter of 8 would challenge anything. She had a good head, a good heart, and a good brain. And she wouldn't let her mother go get away with anything. But she also had another daughter, whatever mum says I will do, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you had this 6-year-old kid calling her father's new partner slapper and knowing what a slapper was. I didn't know at the time. I'd not actually heard the term. I'd heard lots of other terms for it, but I thought a slapper actually meant that when you go around, you lose a temper and she might slap you around the face. I didn't know. This kid was actually thinking, I don't want to go around and see my father with a slapper.
So where does a 6-year-old get that phrase from? Their mom?
Well, of her mum.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because she'd done such a good job of your father is a waste of space or whatever, and she really went to that sort of extreme with it. And the other thing that happened then is that whenever she used to walk past his house, she used to cross the kids over to the other side of the road, and they'd have to walk past on the other side of the road from his house. And then when when the house was out of view, they'd cross back over again. and she would make them walk sideways with their backs turned towards the house.
Oh dear, dear.
When she split up with me, she did exactly the same thing again when she was passing my dad's house. And my dad reported to me at one time, I saw your ex-wife and her two children walking along our street at one time. And as soon as she got within reasonable distance from the house, she crossed them over the other side of the road and tried to force them not to look at the house, because that's where horrible man used to live, sort of thing.
How petty.
But the 8-year-old, but he said, but I saw the 8-year-old girl who really loved you to bits, walking along, turning her head over her shoulders and craning her neck further and further as she got further away to keep the house in view for as long as possible, because she wasn't having any of this.
Wow. So did these children have any relationship with their dad? That you know of?
No, they didn't see him, and they didn't see him, and I don't know. I don't want to say anything about what their father was really like, because A, I never met him, and B, after that, I'm no longer sure after all of this time how much of what she said he was like, and how unreliable he was or whatever. I don't know how much of that is true, so I'm not going to go down.
No, I mean, it's
not fair. I have to assume nothing, believe no one, and check facts, and the facts are no longer checkable.
No, sure, no, that's fair enough. That's fair. But I mean, we do know that denigrating someone is something that that abusers and narcissists do, isn't it? They specialize in it, don't they?
I saw it happen. You only had to say one thing that she didn't like and she wouldn't speak to you for 5 days.
Right.
She was a flouncer, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
But there we are. Once again, I know, I wanted to tell that story about my experiences of witnessing how somebody else perpetrating parental alienation, which I now know that it is.
Yeah.
Because I want to say to anybody who still believes that there is no such thing as parental alienation, what's that? Scotch mist.
I know. It's like saying, theft is a theory. It's like either somebody's stolen something or they haven't. And with parental alienation, the children have been alienated or they haven't. And alienation is basically when a parent denies contact for no valid reason. Because I mean, there are sometimes occasions.
There are two things. It's denying contact, and it's also lying to the children. Can you imagine what it must be like to grow up and then find that for the first 25 years of your life, your absent parent had been alive and well and longing and trying as hard as they could to get in touch with you, while the parent that you were living with has told you that he was dead? Because I've heard stories like that. And when that happens, you can't trust. You surely you would just never know who to trust.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've chatted, like, as you know, a couple of guys I've spoke to recently, and when I spoke to Craig, he was telling us about even some of the services were complicit in that alienation, like the NSPCC, who supported his children.
That's why I gave them. That's why I gave you that piece of Scotch mist about the slapper and whatever.
Yeah.
If parental alienation doesn't exist, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
I mean, that is just so bizarre.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we know. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we know that not very nice people can say not very nice things to children. I mean, if you can make a child believe in Santa Claus, there's no reason why you can't make them believe that their mother or their father is an unpleasant person. So
Yeah, in
That's
a
what I
way, the
was
Santa
thinking.
Claus thing was going through my mind then, because I was
Yeah.
actually thinking that at least when you believe Santa Claus, if you have honest parents, eventually they will tell you, and it's all a piece of fun anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
I
No,
can remember when
absolutely.
I found out there was no Santa Claus, I wasn't disappointed. It was just, oh, well, it was fun while it lasted. But
Yeah.
this
Oh,
is
I
never.
was gutted.
But this was never fun. Oh, my father was actually a good psychologist, because he'd actually say the bad news is it wasn't Santa Claus. There's no Father Christmas. It was Mum and Dad. The good news is we bought you your first record player, and you can stay up as long as you like to listen to all of the records we bought for you.
Right. Well, that's an
Mm.
interesting.
That was brilliant. That was a brilliant way of doing it, I thought.
Yeah, no, very much so. And actually, Clive, I think that's a lovely way to end it, because you've just mentioned record player, and I know that you're a musician and a songwriter, and I understand, haven't you written a song about the 8-year-old girl that, with your anecdote about the parental alienation? Have you
Yes,
written a song about?
it's only a rough demo, but after they left, I put this together. And usually, if I do write songs, I write songs when I'm walking or when I'm making the breakfast or something like that. And the song is usually written, and I can hear how it should sound within 5 minutes. This one, when I wrote it, I could only write one line at a time, because each line was such a wrench. It was almost like, it was almost like each song was like a tooth being pulled without anesthetic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And
So have you got a name for the song yet?
the song is called, I wrote it shortly after this happened. This was back in the late 90s that this happened. And the song is called Amy's Tune, and in brackets, Imperfect Man.
Oh, okay. It's how fabulous of you to come back on FTD Talk and share those further stories that you had, Clive. I think it's been really great, and I hope our listeners get something from it. I'm sure they will. Again, we're putting the right messages out, I believe. And before why don't you finish, Clive, by saying goodbye, and why don't we play Amy's tune to finish off with?
I've got a couple of notes about the words to that.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah.
There are references to punches and fights, but they weren't literally physical violence. This was actually all about harsh words and saying things, if you like. It was verbal fisticuffs we're talking about.
Okay, so like metaphorical.
So nobody actually hit anyone. It's a metaphorical punch.
Yeah.
And as I said before, this song is actually really, at the moment, because I haven't recorded it fully and properly, this is just a rough demo, and so it's only really available on this podcast.
Wow.
And it's called Amy's Tune, Imperfect Man.
Lovely. Well, here we go. Thanks, Clive. Been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Boat out too far, it drifted out of Shangri-La. Young fools of yesterday grew old and wise today. Too short the lifespan of the dream. Love wasn't all at first it seemed. Too soon we had it all and threw it all away. But when I wish that I could wake up from the dream, find that none of this had been, you were still here for me. I know you wanted to believe with all your heart we had made a brand new start, but that wasn't to be. Now tell me, how can you forgive me now? I said I'd always be around. I must have seemed to let you down so badly. I cannot convince you now, but when you're grown, I hope you'll see an imperfect man is all a man can be. No time to take the time to learn. We were too busy getting burned. Nobody's fault until we handed round the blame. Each night the cruel words we both said go spinning round and round my head. We threw the punches hard to cause the greatest pain. But when the silences and fights were going on, you were never in the wrong. You were constant all through. All I wanted was the chance to help you grow, and that's a thrill I'll never know. There's not a thing I can do but wonder, how can you forgive me now? I said I'd always be around. I must have seemed to let you down so badly. I could not convince you now. But when you're grown, I hope you'll see, an imperfect man is all a man can be. Caught in the crosstalk and the games of children so much older, you weren't equipped to take the pain we loaded on your shoulder. Forgive me now. I said I'd always be around. I must have seemed to let you down so badly. I could not convince you now. But when you're grown, I hope you'll see, an imperfect man is all